Broadcast is live. Back, I warned you we were going to be a little bit late. So the late was, we're in my kitchen. We've been in my kitchen before. And a lot of you may know that our good friend Griffin was doing a lot of updates to our house, one of which was replacing a window in the kitchen that's like over that way. And but instead of like, so this house came with like all of these super tall windows that none of them are the same shape on any part of the house, so replacing them is a pain in the dick. And they're all drafty. None of them fit quite right because the house is settled, because it's as old as you are. And anyway, so long story short is there's this really cool octagonal window right over there. It's very, very snowy outside, and it faces directly where the sun starts to set. So as the sun was coming down, we just ended up with this flood of white light. It was messing with, well, first of all, my ability to like focus on anything, and like the camera thing, it just screwed everything up. So we were like, okay, there's no curtain over this window. So we had to fiddle around with stuff. Anyway, hi.
Yes, hello. I had never realized these counters were so reflective.
Oh my god, no, like the whole place was just like lighting disaster everywhere.
But now we can get to the fun things.
I mean, the thing is it's the exact opposite problem that we have anywhere else in the house. Like the house is dark everywhere else, and then suddenly we have like this spotlight that I felt like I was sizzling in.
Pretty much, I'm pretty sure I saw steam rising.
Well, it was more my eyes. Like I am not made for that kind of light. Anyway, I haven't live streamed in a while. This is not a Keefe stream, although we do have a batch of Keefe that will be done very soon.
That's right.
I will be using a little bit of it tonight as an experiment.
So the amazing thing about the way you do all your projects, I forget about like 80% of what you're working on. And then it gets close to being done, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this thing that you've been working on for like 3 months, 4 months, in some cases, a year.
Well, but the spirit communication Keefe, I had made to have some of it at least available for me to use tonight for the ritual. So tonight is a House Kepru ritual. We loosely follow the pagan wheel of the year, which the end of January, beginning of February is on the traditional wheel of the year called Imbolc. So if you're a garden variety pagan, that is a Feast of Bridget, or it is sort of like the last of winter, the beginning of spring, like the first sort of spark of new life coming and the promise of spring and whatnot. It's sort of agrarian. And when I wrote the Keprian ritual system, I was like, none of us are farmers anymore. Like, we don't really relate to any of this stuff. It doesn't quite click. We don't really work with gods and goddesses. So like, what? I kept the wheel of the year because it's a solar calendar. There's solstices, there are equinoxes, there's things in between them, and that made sense. Like I'm like, that's a way to mark time. But what do these mean to us? Like, how do these speak to us? The February 1st ritual always was a little like, but I don't know what's going on. And then, so I work with a class of spirits in House Kepler that I call the disembodied, to make a clear distinction between them and like your average ghost. And they're not quite ancestor spirits, although if you've caught other streams, I'll use that term in lieu of having to have a 40-minute explanation of what they are. They're us. I mean, like they're connected to us. They're part of our system. We kind of trade places back and forth. And to make a long story short, our ritual at this time of year is a point of honoring them. They made the specific request of having a ritual in our cycle set aside to make offerings to them, to call them by name for the ones that we know, to acknowledge the work that they do for holding boundaries for us and helping to hold ritual space. I tell the story about getting comfortable with this idea in Haunting Experiences, which was out of print and now is not, because...
What? Not now.
Well,
not now.
Okay.
Tomorrow.
All right. It's very important.
Release date is tomorrow.
This comes out and you can have a copy of it again. Thank you very much to all of the hard work of Illyria and Kat Rogers, or Abrielle, depending on where you see her online,
Amazing
who did this
graphic designer.
freaking awesome cover. Look at that. Oh. Anyway,
It will say second edition. So this one, it was originally published in 2009.
Yeah.
And it was through a traditional publisher. Let's see. There's so many different things to mention.
There's so many layers to how it works.
Yeah.
But one was getting rights back.
Yeah.
Which is actually way trickier than it ever sounds. It's not like you can be like, hey, publisher that I published this book through, can I just have the rights back? Because it's...
Unless it's built into the contract, which in this case it was.
Yeah.
This was through Llewellyn the first time it got published.
Well, and some of the older contracts are complicated. You know, that's industry speak that's probably like really dry and boring, but the basic thing is I published and signed contracts before electronic books and print on demand became a common way of getting books out. So those old contracts out of print counted as a really big benchmark, and out of print was when you would get your rights back. But technically no book goes out of print anymore because you can have it on print on demand and you can have it on digital, which always leaves that rights issue in a really weird amorphous gray area.
Especially when, like, I was talking to a family member recently, and I guess I've sort of become accustomed to the numbers that go along with this, like that as an author publishing through a traditional publisher, you make between usually 6 and 10% of the cover price of the book.
Oh,
where
depending on, not always the cover price. Actually, it's not the cover price. It's what they
profit.
make. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's between 6 and 10% of their profit. So not even the cover price. With the Psychic Vampire Codex, that was like 98 cents a book.
So the amazing difference, like, you know, self-publishing is what we're doing with this. Like, it's through Amazon's Kindle Direct.
And as much as that's a little bit of a deal with the devil,
but it pays like 60% of the cover price.
Yeah.
So much more of, you know, the actual money that's generated from every sale of the book goes to the author in this case.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Yeah, I do prefer self-publishing and print on demand when possible, because these days it's so much easier and I have so much more creative control. Like, there were pronoun issues and some other things, especially in the earlier books, that editors would just be like, you can't use they, them. And I'm like, why the fuck not? I'm going to.
You are the author and in fact can now do what you want.
And in a few cases, like, I've grown and changed in how I relate to the world. So some of my earlier stuff, you can see like institutionalized like misogyny just sort of spill out in self-deprecating comments that even I wasn't aware of at the time, but being able to like go back over it and go, huh, no, that doesn't need to be there anymore. I don't need to, like, you know, denigrate sewing as women's work just because somebody told me that 50 billion times, which is one of the things that we took out of Haunting Experiences.
Yeah, it was really neat to go through and see those places where, like, an attitude that I know isn't actually yours was reflected in your writing, and just be able to say, you know what, this is not the person who wrote this book, so let's update it.
But to go back to spirits.
Yes, spirits.
So tonight I'm leading the ritual for House Kepru, where we invite our disembodied to join us in the circle, and we make offerings to them. And we all open the opportunity for spirit communication. We have one person who has a role. They are the speaker for the disembodied. And it's not exactly channeling. It's more like having a spirit stand kind of close by and pass a message along. So that person who fulfills that role is like a relay racer. Like the spirits come up and they pass along what they want to say, and that person then translates. And because we're at a distance and we're doing so many things through Zoom and Discord and, you know, online, we can't really get that like visceral sense of all gathering in the ritual chamber. And the moment where we cup our hands and gather energy and then turn around outward in the circle and face and make that offering. So I've encouraged folks to make something, to make a physical thing as an offering to represent what they are, just the gift that they're giving me, the awareness and the gratitude that these are spirits that walk the boundaries for us, that hold space for us, maintain protection and wards in our homes and sacred spaces, that there's a very symbiotic relationship that we have. And one of the fun things I have is an offering cake that is ancient. It is, I brought this out to read. So this is a neat little thing called In the Belly of the Ibis. It was written by an Egyptologist in the 70s, and it is sort of his like high language translations of various prayers from the Egyptian books of the dead, things like that. And this is the one that stood out to me because it talks about these sort of offering cakes. May the sun in heaven be favorable to thee. May he cause the two lords to be favorable to thee. May the night be favorable to thee. May the two ladies be favorable to thee. This offering I bring to thee. By day thou seest the offering before thee. By night thou hearest the offering behind thee. A healthy cake, sound and whole, is the offering with thee. Now, the ancient Egyptians are pretty famous for having a very elaborate funerary tradition and tradition for making offerings and prayers to the departed. And there were all kinds of things that were brought to the tombs or left at the stele in order to honor the dead. And one of those is, and you can see this in a lot of the art, like they look like tiny little pyramids or cones, and they are cakes made of tiger nut flour, which is actually not a nut. It is, it's a rhizome, part of a grass grain that is actually really quite tasty. It's a fun snack to have. It's not actually flour either. It's totally gluten free, and it's the simplest recipe ever. Anyway, so you get tiger nut flour to make these cakes, and you get honey. I'm using haunted honey from the folks who harvest it from wayward beehives that have set up shop in the mausoleums of New Orleans. And they go and get these out because folks really don't want a whole host of bees in their family mausoleum. And that's all. You can add some spice to it. It is baked a little bit. They would usually just sort of like put them out in the sun. So my oven is set at like 275. They don't get like baked hard. It's just enough to firm it up. The honey is important for a couple of reasons. It was a sacred substance in Egyptian culture at the time. It was seen as both a medicine and a kind of communion. Bees were tied to the pharaoh. There's a whole lot that goes in with that. I am going to be trying an attempt. I have no certain guarantee. This is the first time I'm trying it. A version that is vegan, that is using blackstrap molasses.
Ooh.
Yeah.
That's an interesting
looking
liquid.
Yeah, it's something else. I think that it will have about the same effect. The whole point with it is the honey or the molasses. You get some of the flour and you put it in a little thing. Doesn't have to be much. I usually use about, well, this is just a heaping tablespoon, could be a eighth of a cup. And then you just use enough honey. Actually, let's do the molasses because I'm just real curious. Just enough to wet it. And you're going to use like little bits at a time. And you knead it with your fingers until you get a dough that is about the consistency of Play-Doh, that you can then shape this stuff into cones. Your fingers will get sticky. That will happen. If it gets too liquidy and too runny, you just add a little bit more flour. Oh yeah, I'm just going to have this all over my fingers.
Let's see. So we've got a couple of questions about haunting experiences.
Yeah.
Where should people go to get the ebook.
Well, you have, I think, better answers than I do about that because you have been spearheading the whole process.
I can come around to answer that one.
Okay.
So, the quick answer is the cheapest version of the ebook will also be available at michellebelanger.com/store, which is the link right down there. Right there, I see it. That is, there will be a PDF copy there tomorrow. That is also the same link at which you can order your signed and personalized hard copy, signed by the author. Do not, if you're going to look at Amazon and see if you can order from there, do not order the ebook that they have up right now for, I believe, $18.99. That is the first edition. It is being sold illegally without the copyright owner's permission.
Yeah, Amazon hasn't taken it down, and
No,
we're not sure
they
where any of that
haven't.
money is going because it's not going to me anymore.
Yeah.
And it's, we're kind of arguing with them about that.
We're working on that very actively. It's also only going to be $5.99 for the ebook on Amazon tomorrow. The second edition, the updated edition, that is the exciting, like,
Yeah,
publisher.
seriously, I never understood publishers making the decision to make the ebook cost as much as the physical book because it simply doesn't. It doesn't cost that much to produce. Like, why would you do that? Beyond just, well, okay, yeah, all right, that is
I feel
why.
like that's the reason.
Okay, the first thing
yeah.
I've got to say that I noticed from this is with the molasses, you have to use a lot more molasses to get it to do stuff.
I'm gonna go move the camera so you
Yeah,
can see how
and
the
it's very dark.
consistency is getting very different. It's intriguing.
I have it very stuck to my fingers, and it also now looks like chocolate because the molasses are so dark.
This might be a problem for any of it surviving very long.
Well, I have no idea what this tastes like with molasses, but we'll see.
All right. Let me check and see if there is more questions in the live stream.
I need just a little bit more flour into this. I also will say that the molasses don't feel quite as bindy. Like there's something about the honey that just mixes with the nut flour. If you're curious about where to get tiger nut flour, I recommend Anthony's Organic. You can find it on a bunch of different sites online. It's about, it's under $20 for a pound. That might be out of some people's price range for just a random experiment. I just call these offering cakes. You can find a couple of like ancient recipes for them online. And I believe you will see them referred to as shot cakes, S-H-A-T, or shan cakes, depending on what Egyptologist is translating the old texts.
Neat.
Also, these are edible, they're very tasty, and I know different people do different things with like food offerings and stuff. When I made these last year, our disembodied made the specific request of having us eat at least one ourselves as part of the offering to enjoy it, to taste it, and to offer up the experience more so than the food itself, which was an interesting take rather than just having random food sitting around my house. Okay, we have a dough.
Cool.
Alright. Molasses have a weird smell to them.
Interesting. People are wondering if it will be a little bitter with the molasses.
I'm not sure. I've never made this with molasses. This is what the dough looks like. Like I said, consistency of Play-Doh. And actually, if you want to take it over here real quick, I have a little piece of parchment paper, and then you just like literally pinch them to make tiny little cones. They will look a lot like incense cones. Do not mistake them for incense cones. If somebody has made these, they do not light or burn very well.
They do look very tasty, though.
Well, yeah, you ate most of them last year.
Yeah, they were delicious. So someone on the live stream was asking, can you talk about the process of leaving food as an offering? How long should it stay out? Yeah, just all the...
I think it varies from person to person and sort of like what their tradition is. For me, so an interesting thing about leaving food for offerings, we've got a friend who runs a blog, Blue Flame Magic with a K. I believe on the blog, it goes into, they're part of a Tibetan Buddhist tradition, and food has to be left out to spirits on a pretty regular basis. And they notice that it doesn't decay the same way, and spoil in ways that are kind of counterintuitive to food. So one, how long do you leave food out and how do you leave it out? First questions to answer: do you have small children? Do you have pets? Is it food that the small children and pets should not get into? Because you need to make decisions about where and how you put it out, in that case, to keep the pets and your small children safe. Are the spirits physically eating the food? No, it's literally the thought that counts. So you are using this as sort of a proxy, as a representation of attention, of care, of energy. You can leave it out overnight. You can make a food offering of a meal that you sit down and share with the spirits. Or you can experiment, like my friend, and leave it out in a safe place on your altar for a week or so and just see how it changes and what is the interaction of the food in a sacred space as opposed to how you might leave it out in a different circumstance. So anyway, for me, the main consideration is one of practicality and safety. So where is it safe? How long can you leave it out and have it not be bothered by pets or children? And have it not bother you, because if it does start to spoil, you don't really want it. One of the things that I will do with food offerings that I've left on altars indoors, after about 5 to 7 days, I will take it and put it outside for, I usually have a little spot in the back of the garden that I leave for whatever local thing might eat it. And again, assuming it's something that is safe. Otherwise, feel safe to throw it out or burn it. Okay. Scrape the last little bit of this off because I have just enough for one more little cone. You can eat, because there's no eggs or anything in this, like you can eat the raw dough. Cooking it in this case is just so it holds its form a little bit longer and dries out a bit.
One last cake.
Yeah. One last cake with all of this stuff stuck underneath my fingernails, so I'm going to wash my hands. Here we go. So yeah, tiny little offering cakes. I usually put out 3. And that is, again, literally tiger nut flour and a sweet to bind it. Molasses, because I wanted to see if I could make a vegan variety. But traditionally it's honey. They can be like unflavored, unspiced, but a common thing that was added in the past was cinnamon. And I actually was going to make one this year. I often will do things just, cooking is very much magic and alchemy for me, so I'll be like, this sounds good. There's a French blend called quatre épices, which is literally 4 spice. But 4 spice is white pepper, ginger, nutmeg, and cloves.
Ooh, yum. Which
fits a whole bunch of things that would have been put in various things from that time period. Ancient Egypt had a lot going on with the spice trade. They were motivated to do so because they did so much sacred stuff and so much incense stuff. But I think the batch that I'm making with honey will be with quatre épices.
Sounds delicious. And one last question from the chat. So ways to dispose of spent offerings include burning, burying.
Burning, burying, if it is food that is safe for wildlife to eat, and you live somewhere where you've got access to like a little bit of wild space, put it outside where something can have it. And yeah, otherwise, yeah, it's perfectly okay. You're not, committing sacrilege if you throw out an offering. Because again, the physical substance of the offering is a carrier for the attention and the intention of the offering. Seriously, I'm gonna wash my hands. To which end? What?
I've got one last
Okay,
thing to
one
say
last thing.
because I've noticed a bunch of people on the live have missed seeing you streaming.
Oh, yep, yep.
And I wanted to show one of my favorite
Oh, yeah.
pages in this book. So this is something that we've never put in a book before.
Yeah,
this is one of the first books that Michelle has self-published since the community at patreon.com/haunted got started. These are the names of all the people who support Michelle on Patreon. It's thanks to them that we were able to get the rights back and bring this book back into print. And the folks at that Patreon community get to see Michelle live at least once a week, if not 2 or 3 times a week.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons why I'm more scarce in like public live streams, because I live online now. Like there's patron chats and book club and just lots of hangouts and things. And it's sometimes hard to wrangle my time for everything else, because I am an introverted soul and I prefer my books and my games. Not that I dislike people, but after a while talking is exhausting.
Right.
But so offering cakes, and again, tiger nut flour in this case, honey, and cook them up for about 5 to 10 minutes, maybe as much as 15, until the outside is just a little like dried out Play-Doh, honestly. And they will keep forever between the tiger nut flour and the honey. Like they don't go bad. I had them out for 6 months or more downstairs, and there was no mold, there was no anything. Like the honey's important in that case because it is something that has a lot of natural things to prevent that. So it's one of the reasons they use it. And
I honestly, one of the things I'm most excited about with this book, though, is that when I was reading through it, you had asked me if you should add in a few new stories, and I managed to convince you that it was actually time to write a second volume.
I do have many more stories.
I'm
and
excited.
So yeah, that one ends with the story of like how I accepted the relationship with the disembodied and what all of that was and how that came about. And I don't reveal everything in Haunting Experiences. I didn't feel comfortable doing so. But there are many other layers to that relationship, and like Illyria said, that's for another book.